The Gloriana set by ThebeMoon. Read by LMX Mabella. Chapter 51. Prey. Warning. This chapter contains violence, a minor character death, and an attempted sexual assault. It's a dark chapter, but not without its lighter moments.
I told Blaise and Pansy about us yesterday, Draco said. They were quite relieved to hear it.
Draco and Hermione were walking through the secret passage to Hogwarts, both feeling a bit sticky from the disembodied hand despite Hermione's spell. She couldn't wait to take a bath. "Do you know where Blaise and Ginny are this weekend?" she asked. He stopped and looked down at her.
"Yes, but I'm not sure you'll like it."
She waited, and he sighed and went on.
"They're at Zabini Castle in Italy."
Hermione blinked. "All weekend?"
"Yes."
"Why didn't Ginny tell me?" she wondered.
"Blaise planned it as a surprise."
Hermione pondered this as they resumed walking. Would Ginny get the chance to unearth the real Blaise? Ginny's voice echoed in her mind. "Your Malfoy is a hot mess with a thin veneer of Slytherin." Blaise was an entirely different matter. They emerged from the tapestry by the witch's hump and began walking towards the nearest staircase. Draco cast a quick look around, his face and hair shining in the sunlight from the corridor's wide window.
"There is a prefect's bathroom on this floor,"
he murmured, taking her hand.
"What do you say we both go?"
"Mr. Malfoy,"
boomed a familiar voice from the third-floor landing.
"Just the one I wanted to see."
Sarkon strode towards them, moving surprisingly quickly for such a stout man, jowls wobbling. The professor wore bright yellow robes, round sunglasses, and a broad-rimmed hat.
"And Miss Granger, how are you this fine day?" "Sir," Draco said politely, "if you will, we have another small situation with those first years."
Sarkon chuckled.
"Little scamps. Try to break into the patient's lab."
"Are they all right?" Hermione asked.
"Why wouldn't they be?"
Draco began, his eyes narrowed. "What were those warts you said, Hermione?"
"Oh, no need to fret, lad. Your little friends are just fine. A nice rainbow hex, was it not, Miss Granger?"
"It should wear off in a day," Hermione said. "A week, tops."
"What did you do to the squeaky mice?"
demanded Draco. Hermione crossed her arms. "As the professor said, they're perfectly fine. They're just a bit colourful."
"Yes, quite a powerful hex,"
Sarkon chortled.
"Turns any trespassers one of 7 colours. So clever of you, Miss Granger, to warn me."
He turned to Draco.
"I'm afraid I need you, Mr. Malfoy, to oversee their additional detention. They're writing sentences in the potions dungeon with Mr. Macmillan right now, but I worry he won't be able to cope."
"Surely such a serious infraction is best handled by yourself, Professor."
Draco began smoothly in his best Lucius voice.
"Oh, yes, of course, certainly," Sarkon said, "but unfortunately I have a prior engagement. A garden party at a very influential minister's home simply cannot be missed."
"I'm clearly in no fit state to play such a role with the required—"
Draco began, still in full Lord Malfoy mode.
Sarkon chuckled again. "No, you look perfectly acceptable, my boy. More than sufficient for Hufflepuffs, I assure you."
The professor bowed to Hermione.
"Miss Granger, lovely as always."
He looked expectantly at Draco, who was struggling not to scowl. "I'll clean up and join you," Hermione said. "I want to recheck my wards around the lab."
"Damned squeaky mice."
Draco growled under his breath as he followed Sarkon. Hermione was walking toward Gryffindor Tower, thinking that Draco was rather hot when he looked and sounded like Lucius, and wondering what that said about her, when a shrill hooting caught her attention. A small cream and chocolate owl was perched on a suit of armor by the third-floor landing. "Brownie?" Hermione asked, stepping closer. The owl howled. "What is it, Brownie? Is it Theo?" Brownie flapped his wings, golden eyes fixed on Hermione. "Will you take me to him?" she asked. The owl immediately flew off down the corridor. Hermione followed, wand in hand, pushing past the startled student.
"She's mad, I tell you. I heard you planned an orgy with—"
and panting as she climbed the stairs to the 5th-floor landing. There she nearly crashed into Theo himself, holding his wand and dressed in all black, his broad form wrapped in a black cloak. He stood alone in the wide stone corridor, looking entirely Slytherin and dangerous, his jaw set and his green eyes cold.
"Where do you think you're going?"
Hermione asked, hands on hips. Theo's eyes narrowed.
"You don't need to know."
"I most certainly do. There's a Death Eater cell out there. Your uncle is part of it,
And you're trying to leave the castle again."
"Keep your voice down,"
Theo hissed.
"How did you?"
His eyes flickered over to Brownie, hooting nervously from a nearby gargoyle.
"Of course," he sneered. "The owl."
Hermione sniffed. Typical pureblood, merely seeing other magical creatures as monsters or servants.
"His name is Brownie,"
Hermione said. She shifted slightly so she blocked his path to the stairs.
"I don't have time for this,"
Theo said through gritted teeth.
"I'm sorry, Hermione, but—"
He raised his wand, but Hermione was faster.
"Expelliarmus!"
she hissed, and Theo's wand slid smoothly into her hand.
"Damn it, Hermione!"
Theo shouted. He moved towards her, then froze as Hermione pointed her wand at his throat.
"Hermione,"
he repeated more calmly.
"You have to let me leave."
"I'm not stopping you," she said, not lowering her wand an inch. "Take me with you."
"What? No!"
Theo's green eyes were wide. "Fine," she said. "Then I'm telling McGonagall." Theo looked like a panther ready to spring. His hands flexed slightly. Hermione stood straight, both wands out, feeling that knotty tightness in her stomach she remembered from the war. But she would not be intimidated. Theo was not leaving without her.
"Now, Hermione, be reasonable,"
he said, shifting tactics and adopting a low, rumbling hypnotic tone. Images from the storage room came unbidden to her mind and sent shivers down her back.
"This is family business, and you have no place in it."
Step forward, hand outstretched.
"My wand, please."
"You're not going alone," she said. "I won't allow it."
"Very well. I suppose I have no choice."
He sighed.
"I won't go at all, then. Now give me my wand."
Hermione didn't move. "Swear on your family ring, Theodore. Swear you won't try to leave me behind today." Her recent research on pureblood noble family artifacts was paying off. Theo could never break a promise made on his signet ring.
"Don't be ridiculous."
His eyes cast around, seeking escape, but the corridor and nearby staircase were deserted. "Swear on your ring," she repeated.
"I won't."
Theo growled, charged forward, and a hard hand grasped her arm, pushing her against the wall.
"You're not coming."
Theo was so much bigger than Hermione, blocking her on all sides that she couldn't move. Their eyes met, his body against hers, his breath in her face. He hesitated, and Hermione heard a gasp from the staircase and a flurry of footsteps. Theo turned his head, and Hermione dropped both wands. "Stupefy!" she snapped, fluttering her fingers to aid the wandless spell. Theo fell to the floor in the heap, but he wasn't stunned, merely knocked down. Hermione scooped up the wands and stood over him, pointing both wands at his head. "Don't ever grab me like that again," she said. "I'll cast a real stunning spell next time. You won't enjoy it." She eyed him coldly. "Your father didn't." Theo struggled to sit up, too furious to speak. "Swear on your ring, Theo," she commanded again. "Swear you'll take me with you when you leave the castle."
"Never."
Theo growled. "Just for today. Right now, or you'll wake up in McGonagall's office with a splitting headache." Theo was still lying on the floor, glaring up at Hermione. Hermione didn't move.
"All right,"
he said thickly.
"All right."
Theo sat up, hands on his knees, and said in a somber voice,
"I swear on the not sigil that I will bring Hermione Granger when I leave the castle. Today. Ab ipso ferro."
Signet ring glowed green, then faded. Hermione dropped his wand into his hand, and Theo staggered to his feet.
"You're going to regret this,"
he had said in a dark voice with portent.
"You shouldn't go."
"Show me the note from Regis." She held out her hand. Theo hesitated, then complied with a glowering look at Brownie. Hermione unrolled the scroll, only 2 short lines.
"Meet me at the shack. Bring the portkey."
"The shack?" she asked. Theo looked uncomfortable.
"A family place in Wales."
She handed back the scroll. "This way, then." They had to start moving. Hermione turned and headed back to the statue of the humpbacked witch. Apparently she was doomed to reveal the Marauder's secret passage to every Slytherin in the castle. She opened the statue and led him into the passageway behind her tapestry. Brownie flew in behind them.
"Where does this lead?"
Theo asked behind her as they moved through the passage, their way lit by their wands. Honeyduke's cellar.
How do you know about it?
I can't tell you, Hermione said.
I bet you know a lot of secret passages, you and your hero, boy,
Theo said, sounding just like Draco. Hermione ignored this. When did Regis first contact you? Theo said nothing, and she stopped, turning to face him. Shadows lay heavy on his face, and the harsh lines were back, lit by his wand. You have to tell me, she said. I need to know what I'm walking into here.
Uncle Reggie first wrote me in September.
Theo sounded resigned.
He said he wanted out of the Death Eaters to escape to Germany. He asked for my help. I'm head of the family now.
Hermione turned and continued moving along the passage. The way was wide enough now to trot side by side. They were outside the castle. And you have a portkey, she said.
Yes, a silver fork from my grandmother. The first time I went to meet him.
When was that? She asked.
The night of your birthday, Theo muttered. You were at the slug party. I left the castle and apparated to the shack, waited half the night, but he didn't show. Second time was the day.
He swallowed.
The day we went to the Spangled Vale. My uncle's note said he had trouble slipping away, but wanted to try again. I waited for 2 hours before leaving to get ready for our date.
Hermione couldn't help thinking back to their conversation over dinner that night. No wonder Theo had looked a bit dark when speaking of his family. Theo gave Hermione a resentful look.
The last time was Halloween, of course, and I was prevented from leaving the castle.
Hermione sniffed. Should be thanking her, really. What's this shack? She asked, switching topics.
It's a hunting shack.
Theo quickened his stride, refusing to look at her. He's hiding something, Hermione thought, suddenly highly aware that she was headed to Wales with a still bitter Slytherin ex-boyfriend, and nobody knew where she was. Following the son of a Death Eater to meet a Death Eater in a Death Eater hideout. She thought of Draco and almost quailed, but there had been no time to fetch him. Did Regis tell you anything about this cell? She asked briskly. How many Death Eaters? What he's been doing?
No, Theo said. He just wants out, and I won't turn him over to the Aurors.
They made the rest of the journey through the passage in silence, quickening their pace until they were nearly running. They skidded to a stop at a wooden door, and stepped into the cellar, peeking around a shelf to make sure no one was nearby.
Ready?
Theo asked. He hesitated, then held out his hand, and Hermione took it, clutching her wand tightly. Theo twirled, apparating them inside a small one-room cottage. There was nothing inside the pine structure except a fireplace and 2 3-level bunks. The warped wood floor was covered in suspiciously dark stains. Hermione gave the room a slow sweep with her hand. It's clear.
Stay away from the windows,
Theo said. They crouched down in a corner facing the single closed door, the late afternoon sun shining weakly through dirty glass. For a time the two said nothing, just listened to the whistle of wind, the murmur of trees, and the creak of wood during stronger gusts. Reminded Hermione a bit of Godric's Hollow during the war, but instead of a trusted best friend, she had Theo not. I wish Harry was here. Or Draco. She thought about sending the blonde Patronus, but he was likely with the squeaky mice.
When?
Theo asked, finally. Hermione didn't answer.
When?
He repeated, turning to look at her.
When did you stun my father?
They were sitting on the floor, side by side. Brownie's golden eyes shone from the shadows above a top bunk. The Department of Mysteries, she said. Ignatius' not huge, hulking shape and glittering green eyes flashed through her mind. He was there with Voldemort. He grabbed Harry. Fingers tightened on her wand, tracing divine engravings. He dared touch Harry. Hermione didn't know what happened then, but she blinked to find Theo staring wide-eyed at her wand, which was at his throat again. His face was white, and Hermione immediately felt ashamed. Theo was not his father. I'm sorry, Hermione said. She brought her wand down, trying to calm her pounding heart. That was her self-control. 6 Death Eaters could have strolled in just now. Theo was rubbing his throat with one broad hand, so like, Stop it! The two sat in silence, just listening, until Theo spoke again, his voice hoarse.
It killed him,
he said. Hermione stared. What?
That's what the report said from Azkaban.
Theo went on.
Father was buried in the shells of shattered prophecies that day, shards of magical glass slicing into his skin, silvers of glass burrowing into his body to his heart. It was agonizing. He was executed, but he would have died anyway.
Hermione felt a sudden pang, but it was for Theo, not Ignatius. He shouldn't have grabbed Harry, she said quietly. She wouldn't apologize. Then Theo did the last thing she expected. He laughed. A bark of a laugh, pitched low to preserve their hiding place.
No, he shouldn't have.
He looked at her, strange gleam in his green eyes.
Is this the Granger that Draco knows? Theo asked. Terrifying, relentless, fascinating.
You mean bossy and smothering? She couldn't help thinking. Theo's gaze was making her face heat. She considered moving farther away, but they sat in the only part of the shack that couldn't be seen through the windows. Instead, she cleared her throat. You called this a hunting shack. What did your father and uncles hunt? Pheasant? Deer? Theo sighed.
They hunted muggles.
Oh! Hermione swallowed, feeling a little sick. She frowned and nodded to herself.
What is it? Theo asked. What are you thinking?
People love to ask me that question, she said. They rarely love the answer.
Tell me,
he urged. I told Draco once how I flew an ancestral, acting as a bait for Death Eaters, she said. He was angry that I'd risked my life for Harry, but I told him it was worth it, that I would have gladly died. She looked Theo in the eyes. Just now, I was thinking my life would have been worth it to keep men like your uncles from ruling the wizarding world. Theo flushed.
We should leave. He's not.
Brownie gave a shrill warning hoot, and the door rattled violently. A thin, balding man burst in, panting. Hermione leaped up and raised her wand, cursing herself for being taken off guard. But the wizard held no wand. Mary slammed the door shut and half collapsed against it, covered in sweat. The new arrival had long, scraggly black hair and dark, beady eyes. This, Hermione had no doubt, was Regius not. He had Theo's long nose and slashing eyebrows, but his unshaven chin was weak. A low-level Death Eater, Draco had said. Regius hardly saw Hermione, just stretched out a greedy claw to Theo.
Did you bring the portkey, boy?
Regius asked.
Give it to me. Wait, said Theo. Uncle Reggie.
The wooden door flew off its hinges, and all the shack's windows shattered. 2 figures in black cloaks appeared in the doorway once held high.
Blood traitor!
The taller Death Eater shrieked at Theo, casting a stunning spell that Theo barely dodged. The other Death Eater raised an arm to reveal a dark mark, pressing the tip of the wand on the brand. Expelliarmus! Hermione shouted, pointing her wand at the second figure. The Death Eater's hood fell back, revealing a middle-aged witch with purple hair. The witch sneered at Hermione, her black wand still firmly on the dark mark. Hermione knew that face from the Ministry's wanted posters. Celeste Rosier, a vicious pureblood, much like Bellatrix, but less batshit crazy and therefore even more dangerous. Expelliarmus, Celeste sang out, imitating Hermione's tone, and both Hermione and Theo's wands flew into the Death Eater's head. Incarcerus! Ropes shot out from her wand to wrap around Theo. Hermione could only stare, shocked by the failure of her most reliable spell. A go-to spell. So predictable. Bluebell would be disappointed. Regis, meanwhile, had retreated to a corner by a bunk. You've done well, Gretchy, Celeste praised him. So, this is Iggy's baby boy. She ignored Hermione and stepped over to Theo. Pretty, she crooned, reaching up to tuck his hair. I'll have use for this one, she smirked. So like his father. Theo jerked his head back, horrified. Don't touch me, he snarled. I'm not joining you. The witch barked a laugh. Oh, well, I'll let you keep your famous little mudblood if you cooperate. She gave Hermione a dark, knowing look before turning back to Theo, her hand still in his hair. But I rather hope you won't cooperate, dear boy. More fun for me. And then we can keep the mudblood here, as prey. No! Theo shouted, struggling against his robes. Hermione remained still, thinking hard. Celeste's wand had been on her mark, tethering it to her arm. She must be able to call other Death Eaters using.
Mudblood?
The other Death Eater edged closer to Hermione.
Potter's mudblood?
Eyes glittered from inside his hood. Yes, Hermione said defiantly, refusing to back away. Large Wizard was very close now, wand in hand.
Leave her alone,
Theo shouted.
I won't help you if she's hurt. I won't hurt the mudblood,
the Death Eater rumbled.
She might enjoy it.
Hermione's hand shot out to cast a wondrous spell, but the Death Eater shoved her against the wall, her head hitting the wood and breaking her concentration. Everyone keeps pushing me against walls today, her mad mind noted.
Honestly, Warden,
Celeste said, bored, have you no standards at all?
You think you've won the war, mudblood?
The Death Eater hissed, a hand groping under her skirt. Hermione struggled, her elbows striking a rib, which caused her assailant to drop his wand with a clatter and grab her by the throat. The Death Eater's hood fell back, and she could hear Theo shouting and Brownie screeching. Hermione choked for air. The grimy, unshaven face was inches from hers, bald head covered with a single snake and skull tattoo. Walden McNair, ministry executioner between stints of working for Voldemort. He'd obviously escaped after the Battle of Hogwarts. McNair's huge hand was still at her throat, and his other hand tore at her skirt and blouse. Skirt fell, revealing her knickers. Green for Draco, she thought, and he cackled harshly. Hermione tried again to stun him wondrously, but spots filled her vision, and her hand fell again. Theo was still shouting until Celeste cast a silencio. Brownie was screeching, but the noise seemed muffled and far away. Hermione was going to pass out if this continued much longer. The Death Eater dragged her to a lower bunk and pushed her on her stomach. She could hardly breathe with her face pressed against the bunk's mattress, but she kicked back blindly, feeling her boot heel hit something soft. McNair cursed, and the hand tore at her hair. Suddenly a high-pitched shriek filled the shack, and the stinking weight was gone. Hermione flipped over, gasping for air, to see McNair on the floor, screaming in agony, staring wild-eyed at his right arm, which now ended in a bleeding stump. Blood spread in a puddle on the shack's warped floor. Hermione scrambled off the bunk and knelt to grab his wand. Celeste was raising her wand straight at Hermione, Death Eater's face black with fury. Be unpredictable. Hermione's hand closed around McNair's wand, and a tiny flick sent the shack's broken door sailing through the air, shielding her from Celeste just milliseconds before the witch cast her spell. Avada Kedavra! Celeste screamed, and a jet of green light smashed the heavy door. The witch staggered backward, and Brownie swooped in, flapping at Celeste's face. Hermione used the precious extra seconds to concentrate hard on the next spell. McNair's wand was surprisingly cooperative, likely stolen. Half circles, counterclockwise. Muto semper, semper furore, purpura. It was all in the wrist. The last second Avada Kedavra went wildly airy, and then the witch seemed to vanish, but she hadn't. Her wand fell to the floor, and the purple pygmy puff was bouncing on her collapsed black cloak. Hermione stood for a moment, panting. It wasn't a perfect job. The puff was too large, more than a foot in diameter, and its eyes too small, but well enough. Thank Merlin for practical transfiguration exams and flashcards. Brownie flew around Hermione, hooting in concern and hissing at the puff. Hermione looked around. Theo was silently struggling against his bonds. McNair writhed on the floor in agony, a stream of blood flowing from his nose as well. She must have hit it with her boot. With any luck, it was broken. McNair also suffered deep scratches on his bald head, probably from Brownie. Regis lay nearby, his eyes blank and staring. Celeste's final curse had found a victim. Hermione aimed McNair's wand at Theo to release the ropes and restore his voice, then silenced the wounded Death Eater. Theo immediately ran to her.
Hermione, are you all right?
He grasped her shoulders and looked into her face, stone white and terrified, black hair all on end. felt her arms and pushed back her curls, running his hands over her head.
"Tell me you're all right,"
he said frantically, not even noticing the thin cut on his palm.
"Oh, I can see. I can only hear. I couldn't. Hermione, tell me you didn't."
"I'm all right," she said, panting. "Nothing happened. I'm not hurt, see?" She pointed to the bloody Death Eater on the floor. Theo's eyes were wide.
"What did you do to him?"
"I didn't do anything," she answered, confused. "Well, I did the nose." McNair was still screaming silently. "His hand would cut off, but—"
"Oh, Uncle Reggie!"
Theo cried, suddenly distracted. He released Hermione and knelt by his uncle's body. Tears ran down Theo's cheeks, and Hermione felt a burst of sympathy. Looked so much like Harry when Dobby. Hermione knelt down too and put her arms around Theo. "It's not your fault," she whispered. "You tried to save him." He wrapped his arms around her, his head on her shoulder, and they stayed that way until Hermione came to her senses. She gently disentangled herself and stood up. "We'd better leave," she said. "More Death Eaters could be coming." He rubbed savagely at his cheek.
"Where do we go?"
he asked distractedly, looking up at her.
"I can't just leave Uncle Reggie here."
"No, and we have the one-handed wonder to think about too," she answered, glaring at blood-soaked, now unconscious McNair. He looked deader than poor Regis. "And Celeste." The large pygmy puff was trying to reach the door, but kept bouncing backwards. Hermione wrapped ropes around the transfigured Death Eater and tucked McNair's wand into her beaded bag. The bag's thin strap miraculously still slung across her chest. "We'll go to Harry," Hermione decided. "I can sight operate you all. Brownie, please return to Hogwarts, and thank you. Watch out for that pigeon flock." The owl hooted softly and flew out the window. Hermione pulled her and Theo's wand out of Celeste's cloak. "Grab the puff, will you?" she asked Theo. "And if you can bring Regis over here." Theo just looked at her, flushing slightly. "Look, Theo," she said kindly, handing him his wand. "I know this is hard, but we have to—"
"It's not that,"
Theo said, one corner of his mouth turning up.
"It's just, you're sort of missing something."
"Oh, thanks." Picked up her cloak and stuffed it into her beaded bag. "All right, I'm ready." Theo had the struggling puff under one arm and was pulling his uncle's body closer to the wounded Death Eater with the other.
"You're really not,"
he insisted, with a significant look at her lower half. Hermione looked down at herself and gave a squeak. She was wearing a torn purple blouse, black boots, and green knickers.
"Are you sure?"
Theo began, his face grim. "I'm fine. He didn't have a chance to do anything else," Hermione said, with as much dignity as possible. She waved her wand, summoning her skirt, which wrapped around her and repaired itself. It was disturbing how often she used that spell. "I'm fine," she repeated. "Let's go, and keep a hold of that puff." To be continued. Next up, Harry meets Theo. Thank you for listening to this chapter of the Gloriana set by ThebeMoon. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, and AO3.